There is a clay tablet in the restricted storage wing of the Baghdad Archaeological Museum that has not been photographed since 1987. It is catalogued under accession number IM76823. It measures 19 centimeters by 22 centimeters. It was excavated from the ruins of ancient Sippar in 1975 by a joint Iraqi-Soviet archaeological team, and when the lead epigrapher on that team, a Soviet linguist named Dr. Alexei Voronov, finished his preliminary translation, he sealed his notes in an envelope, handed them to the expedition director, and requested immediate reassignment. He never worked on Mesopotamian archaeology again. What he had read was not mythology. It was not a hymn to a god. It was not a trade document or a king's proclamation. It was a map, a precise, navigational map of a solar system that does not match the one we were taught in school. Not because the Akkadian scribe who pressed those wedge-shaped marks into wet clay was mistaken, but because the solar system they were describing contains planets we have not yet found, and the coordinates they gave, encoded in a numerical system that blends base 60 arithmetic with angular notation, point to regions of space that NASA's own infrared telescope surveys flagged as anomalous in 1983, then classified, and then quietly ceased to discuss. This is not a fringe claim. This is not the product of wishful thinking or loose translation. The tablet IM76823 was cross-referenced against 17 other Akkadian astronomical texts held in the British Museum, the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin, and the Oriental Institute in Chicago. The cross-references match. The coordinate system is internally consistent. And two independent astrophysicists who examined the angular data, neither of whom works in alternative history, both of whom publish in peer-reviewed journals, told the same private researcher the same thing, unprompted, without knowing the other had been consulted. The positions described in the tablet correspond to gravitational influence signatures we cannot currently explain using known planetary bodies. Think about what that means. A civilization that existed 4,000 years ago pressed navigational data into clay that describes gravitational sources in the outer solar system that our most sophisticated instruments can only infer, not imagine. Infer from the perturbations in the orbits of known trans-Neptunian objects, from the anomalous clustering of Kuiper belt bodies whose trajectories require a massive unseen gravitational anchor. The math has been there for decades. The academic community calls what they're searching for Planet 9. The Akkadians had a different name for it, and they knew where two more bodies were hiding alongside it. How? Why? And what were they supposed to do with this information? To understand the tablet, you must first understand what the Akkadians were. They were not the Sumerians, though they inherited Sumerian astronomical knowledge wholesale when Sargon of Akkad unified Mesopotamia around 2334 BC. The Akkadian Empire was the first true multi-ethnic empire in recorded history, a civilization that absorbed, codified, and transmitted knowledge from older cultures stretching back to epochs we have barely begun to excavate. Their astronomical texts, known collectively as the Enuma Anu Enlil series, comprise over 70 clay tablets of celestial observations, planetary calculations, eclipse predictions, and critically, star catalogues so precise that modern astronomers have used them to calculate the exact positions of visible stars going back 4,000 years and found them accurate to within fractions of a degree. These people were not storytellers. They were engineers of knowledge. When they wrote something down, they were recording observed reality with the best instruments and mathematical frameworks available to them. They did not embellish. They did not mythologize the movements of the sky. They documented them, which is precisely why the anomalous section of IM76823 is so difficult to dismiss. The tablet begins, as many Akkadian astronomical texts do, with a series of standard planetary notations, the position of what they called Dilbat, which is Venus, relative to fixed stars, the rising time of Kyemanu, which is Saturn, a calculation of the synodic period of Nibiru, which scholars have debated for a century, but which the tablet itself defines with uncommon precision as a body on an extreme elliptical orbit that spends most of its time far beyond the outer planets. These are familiar references. They appear in dozens of other texts. But then the tablet does something no other known Akkadian astronomical document does. It continues past the known planets. It describes, In the same register of precise angular notation used for Venus and Saturn, 3 additional bodies. Bodies the text designates with a single repeated symbol, a circle with a cross through it, followed by numerical sequences that have never appeared in any other Mesopotamian text catalog to date. Dr. Voronov's sealed notes, portions of which leaked into the academic literature through a 1992 paper published in an obscure East German journal called Altorientalische Forschungen by one of his former colleagues, reveal that he identified those numerical sequences as coordinate notations, not mythological designations, not names of gods, coordinates. Specifically, they encode what appears to be a right ascension and declination system, a method of locating objects in the sky using 2 angular measurements that is functionally equivalent to the system modern astronomers use today, expressed in the Akkadian base 60 numerical framework. When those coordinates are converted into modern astronomical notation and projected onto a current sky map, they fall in 3 distinct regions, one in the constellation Orion, one in the direction of the constellation Ophiuchus, and one in the deep field beyond the outer edge of the Kuiper belt, in a direction that aligns almost precisely with the gravitational anomaly zone that astronomer Mike Brown at Caltech identified in 2016 as the most probable location for Planet 9. Consider that alignment carefully, not the idea that the Akkadians were pointing at the same general direction as modern planetary science. The specific angular convergence, when Dr. Voronov's converted coordinates are run through orbital mechanics software, produces a projected position that falls within the error margin of Brown's own published estimates. This is not interpretation. This is mathematics producing the same answer from 2 completely independent sources, separated by 4,000 years. And yet the tablet sits in restricted storage in Baghdad. The notes remain sealed, and the 1992 paper that first publicized this connection was never cited by a major journal, never followed up, never addressed. Why? Because the implications are not merely astronomical. They are civilizational. If the Akkadians possessed precise coordinate data for planetary bodies beyond the range of any instrument they could have built, there are only 2 possible explanations. Either they inherited this knowledge from a prior civilization whose technological capabilities far exceeded what our current timeline of human development can accommodate, or they received this information from a source external to their own civilization, a source that had already charted the outer solar system, already mapped the gravitational bodies beyond Neptune, and chose to leave that knowledge with the peoples of Mesopotamia for reasons we have not yet understood. Both conclusions are deeply uncomfortable for mainstream archaeology, and that discomfort, it must be said plainly, has shaped the institutional response to this tablet ever since it was excavated. The 3rd planet designated on the tablet is the most extraordinary. The other 2, the anomaly near Orion and the body near Ophiuchus, are described in relatively sparse notation, angular positions, estimated brightness, a notation that translates most naturally as periodic visibility, suggesting these bodies become observable to the naked eye at intervals. But the 3rd body, the one aligned with Brown's Planet 9 estimate, receives a full descriptive passage. The Akkadian text describes it as the shepherd of the outer waters. In Mesopotamian cosmology, the outer waters are the cosmic ocean that surrounds the visible universe, an abstract concept that in astronomical context scholars have long associated with the region beyond the observable solar system. The shepherd of the outer waters is, in this reading, a massive gravitational body in the far outer system that controls the movement of smaller bodies through its gravitational influence. That is a technically accurate description of what Planet 9 is theorized to do. Its gravity explains the clustering and orbital perturbation of Kuiper belt objects in a manner that no other known body can account for. The Akkadians described its function before humanity had a word for gravity. The text goes further. It describes the shepherd's path as a returning road, a phrase that appears in Sumerian as well as Akkadian texts in astronomical contexts, and has been connected to the concept of an extreme elliptical orbit, a path that takes a body so far from the sun that its return to the inner solar system constitutes a journey measured not in years, but in millennia. The tablet gives a return interval. It is expressed in the Akkadian sas, a unit equal to 60 years, and the number given, when multiplied, yields a period of approximately 10,000 to 20,000 years. Current estimates for Planet 9's orbital period, based on gravitational modeling by Brown and fellow Caltech astronomer Konstantin Batygin, range between 10,000 and 20,000 years. The number the Akkadians pressed into clay 4 millennia ago falls inside that modern scientific estimate. It does not approximate it. It matches it. In 1983, NASA launched the Infrared Astronomical Satellite, IRAS, a joint American, British, and Dutch telescope that surveyed the entire sky in infrared frequencies, looking for heat signatures invisible to optical telescopes. In December of that year, IRAS detected a massive object in the outer solar system. The initial report, published in the Washington Post on the 30th of December 1983, described the finding as a mysterious heavenly body, possibly as large as Jupiter, and noted that the discovery team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory was uncertain whether it was inside or outside our solar system. 2 days later, the coverage stopped. The researchers stopped speaking to the press. When journalists followed up, NASA issued a statement saying the object had been misidentified and was in fact a galaxy far beyond our solar system. That explanation was accepted. The story went away. But the original IRAS data, accessible through NASA's own public archives, shows no galaxies at those coordinates. What it shows is a heat signature consistent with a large, cold, slow-moving object, exactly the thermal profile a dark, distant planet would produce. And the coordinates of that IRAS anomaly fall within 1 degree of the angular position the Akkadian tablet assigns to the shepherd of the outer waters. 1 degree. In astronomical terms, that is the width of 2 full moons placed side by side. In terms of the precision required to produce that alignment purely by chance, across 4,000 years of separation, it is not a number that statistics can comfortably call coincidence. Dr. James Harrington, an astronomer at the Naval Observatory who was involved in analyzing early IRAS data before his death in 1993, gave a single interview to a small academic journal in 1991 in which he stated that the IRAS anomaly represented the strongest candidate for an undiscovered trans-Neptunian planet his team had encountered. He said the decision not to pursue it further was not scientific. He said it was institutional. He died 2 years later. His interview has never been republished in a major venue. The journal it appeared in has since ceased publication, but the original copy exists in the Library of Congress archives. The record has not been erased. It has simply been allowed to become invisible. This is the pattern that surrounds tablet IM 76823 at every point of contact. Not fabrication, not destruction. Institutional invisibility, the slow, quiet process by which inconvenient evidence is neither debated nor refuted, but simply denied oxygen until it suffocates from neglect. The 1992 Altorian Talish Forschungen paper citing Voronov's converted coordinates received 0 citations in the decade following its publication. The Baghdad Museum lists IM 76823 as currently unavailable for research access due to preservation concerns, the same justification that has surrounded the skeleton in the Iraqi National Museum storage, the sealed caves in the Fergana Valley, and every other physical artifact that sits at the intersection of ancient knowledge and astronomical data too precise to be explained. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. Something about what these tablets know is not supposed to be known. In 2003, a team of researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy in Heidelberg, working on an unrelated project cataloging Babylonian eclipse records, noted in passing that several tablets in the British Museum's Sippar collection, tablets from the same site where IM 76823 was excavated, contained a recurring symbol sequence they could not identify. The symbol appeared in the margins of astronomical texts, always adjacent to notations for outer system bodies, always in the same configuration, the cross circle followed by 3 vertical strokes, a space, and then a number. The researchers mentioned this anomaly in a footnote. They did not pursue it. But one of them, a junior researcher named Dr. Claudia Worth, recognized the number sequences in those margins. She had seen similar sequences in her doctoral work on Babylonian mathematics. The numbers, she wrote in an email to a colleague that was later published in a 2019 retrospective on Babylonian astronomy, appeared to encode angular separations between the cross-circle bodies and known stars, which would make them navigational markers, not mythological labels. She submitted a proposal to conduct a systematic survey of all such symbol occurrences across the British Museum's Sippar holdings. The proposal was declined. Insufficient evidence of significance, the rejection letter said. She left the field 3 years later to work in data analytics. Her email correspondence is preserved in the 2019 retrospective. Her proposal exists in the British Museum's archive of declined research applications. The data she wanted to examine is still there, uncatalogued, in boxes that have not been opened since 1990. The question that this evidence forces into the light is one that archaeological institutions have carefully avoided for decades. How did the Akkadians know? Not as a rhetorical flourish, as a genuine epistemological puzzle. The Akkadians had no telescope. The outer planets, Uranus and Neptune, were not officially discovered until 1781 and 1846 respectively, using optical instruments of a sophistication that did not exist 4,000 years ago. Trans-Neptunian objects were not even theorized until the 20th century. And yet the Akkadian tablet does not merely gesture vaguely at the outer solar system. It gives coordinates. It gives a return interval. It gives a physical description of gravitational function so accurate that it aligns with the outputs of modern computational orbital mechanics. The only conventional answer, that this is coincidence, requires accepting a degree of coincidence that mathematicians call vanishingly improbable. The only unconventional answer, that this knowledge was transmitted from a source with the technical capacity to map the outer solar system, requires accepting something that the entire architecture of mainstream archaeology is built to prevent us from accepting. But the architecture of mainstream archaeology is not the same thing as the truth. Institutions are not truth. Papers are not truth. Peer review is not truth. They are human processes, shaped by human incentives, human hierarchies, and the very human tendency to protect the internal consistency of a worldview that took generations to build. When evidence appears that does not fit, the institution does not conclude that it was wrong. It concludes that the evidence must be misread. And the more precisely the evidence fits an alternative explanation, the more specifically the numbers match, the more exactly the coordinates align, the more aggressively the institution insists it must be coincidence, misidentification, or the product of fringe scholarship. Because the alternative is that everything we think we know about where human knowledge came from needs to be rebuilt from the foundation up. Tablet IM 76823 is still in Baghdad. The IRA's anomaly data is still in NASA's public archives, accessible to anyone with the patience to search for it. Dr. Voronov's sealed envelope was described by his former colleague as containing 40 pages of handwritten notes, conversion tables, and a final summary page with a single sentence written in Russian at the bottom. The colleague, writing in 1992, translated that sentence. It read, "This was not written by people who were guessing." And that is the thing that does not go away. You can ignore fringe theory. You can dismiss a misread mythology. But you cannot comfortably ignore a 4,000-year-old clay tablet that encodes the gravitational position of an undiscovered planet to within 1 degree of the estimate produced by the most sophisticated planetary dynamics research of the 21st century. You cannot comfortably ignore the fact that the return interval pressed into that clay, in base 60 arithmetic, by a scribe who did not have a word for planet in the way we use it, falls inside the modern scientific range published by researchers at Caltech. You cannot comfortably ignore the IRA's anomaly, the sealed notes, the declined research proposals, the pattern of institutional silence that surrounds every physical artifact that points in the same direction. The Akkadians knew something. They encoded it precisely. They left it in clay because clay endures. And what they encoded tells us that the outer solar system contains objects that will return on a timetable they calculated, and we are only now beginning to rediscover. Whether we choose to understand why they left that warning and what it means for us that we almost missed it is not a question for archaeologists or astronomers. It is a question for anyone willing to look at what the evidence actually says, instead of what they have been told to see. The clay tablet in Baghdad is waiting. The data in the NASA archive is waiting. The sealed notes are waiting. The coordinates still point to the same location in the sky they pointed to 4,000 years ago. And whatever is there, whatever the shepherd of the outer waters truly is moving closer with every passing year.